Yo, what's up, man?
Hey,
Can you hear me good?
I can hear you great. Thanks for waiting, man.
Awesome. Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, I always get the fucking times mixed up. Like
It's all good.
sometimes I
I
don't even know what time zone people are in.
I do. It's been quite common with the advent of the everything that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh
And
my God.
most people moving to doing stuff online and doing Zoom and or Skype or whatever. And one of the easiest things to forget. I don't know how many lessons I've done where it's like, oh shit, wait a second, you're in Thailand, and so
Yeah.
it's the 12-hour
Yes.
difference. It's a 12-hour difference, and I totally got the wrong time. I should have clarified.
Yeah. First thing I do is Google,
Yeah,
like
right,
New York to whatever time
right,
and
exactly.
try to get it right all the time. Sometimes I mess it up, but
Yeah,
yeah, the past couple of years, man, everything is just this is the new world, right?
yeah, right,
So these are like new world problems. Like
right. Yeah, exactly. That's right.
no, yeah, right. So
Make sure you know which time zone you're in always.
that's right. That's right. Sometimes I don't even know the month, man. I'm like, what
That's right.
fucking month
That's
is it
right.
right now?
That's right.
Felix Pastorius,
Yes.
welcome to the Hell Fucking Yeah podcast, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
This is really cool, man. So for those who may not know Felix, you should, but if you don't, Felix is the son of the late great jazz bassist legend Jaco Pastorius. Of course, we'll talk about your father a bit, but one thing I really like to emphasize here is individuality. So this will be more about you, your journey.
Cool.
First things first, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. I've been in the process of, well, I feel like I've been moving nonstop for 20 plus years since music started in my life, as a career path.
Yeah.
But the last 6 months or 8 months, I feel like I've been moving nonstop, and including spending a month in Mexico on vacation with my partner, to doing some touring in Europe and in the States, to moving to a whole new state for the first time in 13 years. So
Wow.
I'm a little I feel a little drained, but I feel really good though. So yeah, I just moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and it's been like 2 months of moving. It feels like, which
I
is
hear
kind of
you.
crazy.
I hear you, man. So where did you move from?
I was in I spent 10 years in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh,
I've been
nice.
I've been wanting to move to New York for quite some time. Ever since basically the first time I stepped off a plane and I walked through the sliding glass doors of the airport, and I felt cold air for the first time in my life. I was like, wow, this is different. And then of course, going to all the clubs, and my mother, holding our hands to some of the jazz venues and blues venues throughout New York City, mostly the Lower East Side, Lower West Side, the Village,
Sure.
and just doing that as very small kids. I started going there in '87 when I was 5, and I fell in love with the place. So I always wanted to move there, and I tried to do it in my early 20s, and then I actually made it stick in 2009.
Okay.
And 10 years I was in and around Brooklyn. I lived everywhere from like Park Slope to Greenpoint to Canarsie, and a whole swath of different smaller neighborhoods here and there.
Sure. Did you ever make it out to Long Island?
I mean, yes, I did make it out to Long Island. I never
Okay.
did the bike ride though that I always wanted to do. I wanted to go out to Montauk and ride all the way back,
Yeah.
either to or back. Um, but I had spent some time out there. I did, being a musician, and being an artist, that is, a true working musician. And I don't know what that means necessarily. I don't want need to piss anybody off, but like I've done wedding gigs, and I've done events, and I've done the whole penguin suit thing over the years too. So I've actually played some weddings on Long Island, because there's some good paying wedding gigs out there for sure.
Absolutely, man. That's where I am right now. I
Cool,
live on the island.
nice,
I didn't live here. I grew up here. I moved out of here for a while. I was in Connecticut for like
okay.
eight years or so. Um, and I mean that was only a couple hours away. So I feel you pain on the moving thing. Like just moving a couple hours was
Well, yeah, well,
intense.
living in New York, the thing also was like I never lived in a place larger than a two-bedroom ever the whole
Yeah.
time I was there, because it's
Yeah.
really impossible unless you have
It's
roommates.
yeah.
And even if you do have roommates, then you're still only living in like a one-bedroom, because you have to share the place.
Right.
So I never lived in anything more than a two-bedroom, and so moving even moving like 3 miles apart from each other, was a mission, and
Yeah.
this was, and it was difficult, but moving it was, let's see, I drove, it took me almost 15 hours because of the U-Haul to drive straight from New York to where I live now.
Yeah.
It was a haul, and just emotionally too, and just mentally, everything going on. I was like, oh shit, am I a failure? Did I leave New York because I couldn't make it stick, or just feeling like maybe I hadn't accomplished everything that I wanted to. But it was a lot. It was a lot for me to. I think part of the reason that I did it the way that I did, which was very cut and dry, just be like, all right, I'm out. I literally
Sure.
made it. I made a decision, and as soon as I landed, I played a couple gigs, and I packed my shit and I left.
Yeah.
And I think that was easier for me to just sever things, just be like, I got to get out of here,
Sure.
instead of prolonging it and dragging it on.
Absolutely. What brought you to North Carolina?
North Carolina is the halfway point for me between my two favorite places, which is New York and Florida. And so it's basically me moving close to my family in Florida without having to move to Florida.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not ready to live in that state. And and North Carolina has some, I live in Asheville right now, which is a little tiny blip in this, this fairly red and conservative state. And
Yeah.
not to get political or anything, it's definitely different, and it's definitely not New York for sure.
Right.
So I'm a little bit of a fish out of water thing here. But it's nice. It's got a very diverse thing going on here, both musically and arts and people. And for it to be in an area of the country which I think is really, really beautiful. It's still Eastern Seaboard almost, and we're up in the mountains over here too. The Appalachian Trail is right here. It's beautiful. We sit at like 2,500 feet or something. It's really nice.
Wow. Now that is really nice, man. I have a weird relationship with New York. Like, I grew up here. I love it. I'll always love it. It's like in my heart.
Right.
But I hate it a lot of the times too. Especially out here. Yeah, especially out here on the island. It's just super overpopulated, and the political thing's a big thing here. Yeah. And I want to leave, but then I leave and I'm like, I want to go back. It's such a weird fucking thing.
That's the thing is, I don't know if I'll ever move back to New York, but I know that I'm gonna need to get my fix still, because there's no substitute for it ever. There'll never be a substitute.
It's so true. It's so true.
I still will, but for me, I feel like I have more power over it too, because in terms of me being able to enjoy it for the reasons that I love New York. Whereas before, you're subjected to some of the bullshit that you just kind of like, man, I just don't want to deal with this right now. The energy and the people and the excitement and everything that goes along with that. A lot of times there's some negative bullshit too that you just don't want to deal with, but you're inundated with it because you're literally living on top of each other. It's difficult. But now I can be like, you know what, I've drank enough vitamin C, and I've prepped myself. I'm going to go to New York for a couple of weeks and have some fun and enjoy it. And that's why I feel right now is a really good place to be, is I can go there and be in the element that I love just for that. And then I get the fuck out.
You know what? That's perfect. That's the perfect way to do it. Right now you can like stretch out,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And go there when you need. Like, a lot of the times we go on we'll go on vacations. We'll go to places like major metropolis cities, like London or something like that. And I'm like, this isn't really a vacation. It's
You're going to the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So I'm like, what you got to do is you got to stay out in the countryside and visit London. Visit. That's all.
True. It's true. Same thing I feel the same way with the States. I feel like most people are actually kind of getting, don't get me wrong, you should go to the major cities here throughout the United States. But I think that most people are getting gypped in terms of their real Americana representation of what is here, because those the outside, the edges of this country is really the minority when it comes to the majority of this country. The whole center is what the real America really is. And people have a false sense of it. And I feel the same way, that if you're going to travel to London, stay in the middle of nowhere, drive in between, go between Manchester and London so you can see everything in between. You should do that here too. You shouldn't just fly into the major cities. You should drive in between all of them.
I agree. Last summer, we took a road trip from here to Colorado.
Oh, cool.
It was very long, 30 something hours. Obviously we break it up, but like, it's crazy. You leave, when you get out of the tri-state area and you just see like fields.
Yeah. No.
And just like most of it's flat, whatever, but it's beautiful.
So did you cut across? Did you go up top, or did you go through 40? Did you go through like Pennsylvania and like Ohio and?
Yes, we went through
Yeah. Okay.
Pennsylvania, Ohio,
Cool.
like
Nice.
Indiana,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that whole
Yeah.
direction.
Beautiful.
And it was awesome, man. The way home, we kind of just booked it home. Like
Yeah.
we didn't sleep. We slept in the car, but
Yeah.
my wife and I just
Kept
switched
switching.
off.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that too.
And we got there in like, I don't know, 35 hours, just
Wow.
straight
Booking.
through.
Booking. Love it.
On the way home, you just want to get home. On the way there, you
Exactly.
take your time,
That's right. That's right.
But I definitely recommend it for anybody just looking for something a little different to do. Just go explore the country a little bit, because it
Yeah.
really is a lot of nice sights to see that you wouldn't even think of. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't even think of Iowa, right? Who
Iowa's
thinks of
beautiful,
Iowa?
though.
It's
Iowa
so
is
beautiful, man.
Yeah, no, it is a beautiful state. I know.
They have all those like giant windmills.
Yep. Yep.
And
yep,
I was like, we're in the car and I'm like, I got to look this up. So
yeah,
those windmills provide 30% of the energy for the state.
it's crazy.
And there's only like 3 million people that live in the entire state.
Right.
There's like 8 million people on this island. This little fucking island
That's right.
is like a sardine can, but there's so much room out there. There's so much
It's
room.
like my partner, my girlfriend Bear. Her mother's visiting town right now. Both her parents actually are, and she did a road trip with her mother did a road trip recently just to come here, a drive from Denver, from Boulder, where they're from, and they stopped in Kansas. They stopped in a little town. Oh man, I can't remember the name of it. Something with a Q, Quinter maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think she said the population was like 900 people. And I was like, man, I've lived in buildings in Brooklyn that have more people than that.
That's my little block here.
Exactly, right.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale area. I tell people mostly who aren't familiar with Florida, I tell most people Fort Lauderdale. But it's actually the little strip of land is called Deerfield Beach.
Okay.
And it's the northernmost little city in Broward County, which is Fort Lauderdale County, and it's right below West Palm Beach, which is like Boca Raton. It's pretty. Best beaches in the world. I'm a little biased, but it's the best beaches in the world.
Yeah. I believe it or not, I've been not all over the world, but I've been to enough places and enough places in this country to say I've actually never been to Florida. I just never had a reason to go.
Holy shit! Wow, good.
And good. And I don't know. I guess I'd like to visit some areas. I would need recommendations. I don't know anything about it.
It's a much larger state than people realize, and also because of the different states that it touches, and or the different parts of the Caribbean and the Gulf. It's extremely diverse. Just not just the people, but the landscape and the beaches and the mentality and everything involved. It's a very you can't just go to one part of Florida and say I've been to Florida, because it's impossible. It's just impossible.
Yeah. That's my problem with going international too. Like one of our bucket list places is Italy.
Yeah,
and
my favorite.
Yeah, and we never been, and it's like, all right, where do we go though? Because it's so
impossible. It's absolutely impossible. The north to the south to Sicily are 3 completely different things, and you have to go to each. It's actually my favorite. It might be my favorite European country to tour in, especially if you're going to be traveling on the road. It's so great obviously the landscape and the scenery and everything is beautiful depending on where you are. Well, no, not really depending, but up in the mountains. I mean, you've got the mountains near the Alps in the north that are just breathtaking. Then you've got the ocean and the beaches and everything, and the Mediterranean's right. I mean, it's gorgeous, but the food changes so much. The dialects, the people, the mannerisms, everything's very similar in many ways, but also very unique for that part of the country and that region, which I just love. It's just so diverse.
Yeah.
And the people are great. Food's amazing.
I'd love to go. I feel like I need 2 months there.
At least.
At least, right?
Yeah.
So you know what? Let's get into the music a little bit. Obviously, you're born into a musical household, but was it always the bass for you? And what made you stick with the bass? Did you play any other instruments?
Yeah, for sure. So I played. Well, I grew up in a musical household in the respect that the misconception a lot of times is that, and I don't want to say that because that's such a strong word, but I fucking hate. No, I'm just kidding. It's a lot of times people assume and associate the fact that my father was a musician, so therefore it's built in, it's part of my
Right.
bloodline, it's in my genes, all this other stuff.
Right.
And the fact is that yes, my father did change the world, and he did things that were incomprehensible at the time, and it was just
Mhm.
like, wow, what the hell is going on? And obviously that creates this whole thing afterwards. So of course people are going to immediately jump onto that because it's the most blatantly obvious thing to look at, and to try to assimilate and make sense of the situation. If I'm a musician, then obviously you come from a musician who's the greatest. So that's how it works. But my father wasn't around very much when I was younger, and he
Mhm.
passed away when I was 5.
Yeah.
So the household that we grew up in was really my mother's household. So the music that I was raised around was my father's music.
Mhm.
And, I had him in my life in parts of my brief time that I did have him. But my mother raised me,
Mhm.
and she made sure music was in the house, and made sure music was around us, me and my twin brother, and gave us the option to play music if we wanted to. It wasn't
Cool.
required, it wasn't demanded, but it was like, well, I'm going to make sure there's a drum set in the house, and I'll make sure there's a piano in the house at all times. And
Yeah.
then as we got older, we had other instruments brought in from either garage sales or thrift stores, and just kind of secondhand stuff that would just be like, just to have it as an option to play. And so I took violin lessons. Me and my twin brother took violin lessons when we were 5, which were not like the classical sense violin lessons. We had like stickers on our fingerboard, and like trying to play rubber ducky and shit like that. And it was very painful. I remember even as a 5-year-old that it was very painful to
Wow.
endure and listen to. So we didn't do that. We didn't do that very long. Uh, to needless to say, but a few years later, we started taking piano lessons and guitar lessons, and it was kind of base level instruction, just introductory into music, and wasn't really necessarily teaching music theory or the production of the way music works and scales and this and that or whatever. And so I started doing that like when I was like 7 or 8, and but by that point, Julius and I had already started playing some of the other instruments in the house, and by the time I was 10, I was playing bass a lot more. And we would find ourselves when our mother, or we'd be left home alone, and our mother wouldn't be around or would run out for a minute. We would immediately jump on like the guitar or the bass or the drums and really just start bashing and play loud and aggressive and hard, and turn up the music and play along with it and do stuff like that. And we felt more drawn and attached to it emotionally because of this, boys too, you just want to jump around and get crazy and do
Sure.
stuff like that. Those instruments seem to kind of be more indicative of that style. And also at that time, the way music was happening, grunge was starting out, alternative rock was starting out. There was a lot of really cool stuff that we were just like jumping on board with.
Yeah.
And Primus was like my favorite band when I was
Oh
11.
man, I love Primus.
So
Yeah.
it's easier to do that kind of stuff on drums and bass. So we just kind of fell in line with that, and I never had bass lessons, never had drum lessons, and
Wow.
just kind of started playing that more and more, and then teaching myself more and more. Um, and yeah, again, the growing up in a household of not necessarily musicians, because my mom wasn't a musician either, but growing up in a household where music was readily available to us, any type of music, there was no like censorship from our mother in terms of like what we wanted to listen to or what we should listen to. It was kind of like open, read whatever we wanted to within reason, as long as we were straight up and honest, and shared with her what we were checking out. She'd be willing to give us an opportunity and try it out.
Sure.
And then of course being able to play music, which is really really crazy in some ways too, when it comes to the respect that I have for my mother and what she did for my brother and I, is um, music did not kill my father, did not
Mhm.
take my father away from me and my siblings and my entire family, but music did have a huge impact in his mental health and his ability to stay clean, and his ability to have people around him that who truly cared about him and wasn't trying to use him for the star that he was. And in some ways music was something that kind of did fuck up our lives.
Sure.
And it would be so easy for my mother to have been like, there's no way you're playing music, like you stay away from that, get into sports, get into medicine, get into become a lawyer, like anything else, just
Right.
don't don't play music because look what it did to us. Look what it did to your father. Look what it did to our family. But she never did that. Never one time. Never, ever, ever. In fact, I started going, you know, it was like every show, everything that was happening concerts wise, anything locally was going on. She was always encouraging. It wasn't required or demanded of us. It was always an option. Hey, you want to go see Pat Metheny? Hey, you want to go see Santana? Hey, you want to go downtown Fort Lauderdale and go see Rainey Bernstein? Like whatever it was, let's go check it out if you wanted to. And
Yeah.
that was really important for me.
That's really interesting. So like, I mean, now in retrospect, you can look back and be like, that was kind of surprising, right? For her to react in that way.
100%.
But at that time, did you think that at all? Like, or was it just?
No, it was just natural.
It was just natural.
It was part of the household. It was things that was like, you know, my mom was going out and supporting live music and musicians and our friends, and like that's what we did too. You know, I grew up knowing these people too, and not having an association with them as in terms of them being like super famous or whatever. But like Santana was my first concert ever. My mom literally walked into the room and was like, "Hey, you want to go see Santana?" And I think I was like 6, and she's asking me if I want, as a 6-year-old, if I want to go to a concert. And it was, I don't remember which. I think it was at Sunrise Amphitheater in Fort Lauderdale, and it was just her and my Aunt Holly and me, and we didn't have tickets. And all I remember is my mom walking to the back of the amphitheater, knocking on the door, and some giant burly guy with like, you know, like big jewelry and tough looking guy, hair and the earrings and everything. And my mom was like, "Hey, tell Carlos Ingrid Pastorius is here." And he closes the door, and not 5 minutes passed, and the door swings open. There's Santana, and we just walk in, and we go and check out the show, and we hang out. I'm hanging out with the drummer, and I'm playing like and that was my association to music. That was my association to being around musicians. And I didn't have like, oh, this is Santana. I was just like, oh, cool, we're gonna go see some more music and hang out with some more musicians. That was just it, you know.
Sure. Wow, man, that's insane. So let's just say, like, hypothetical parallel universe, right? Music wasn't in your cards. What else could you see yourself doing for a living?
Well, yeah, shit. Well, if I had gone to school, this is a weird one, but if I had gone to school, I definitely would have played more organized sports, and sports may have been in my life, but that's not necessary. I mean, not to try to dumb down any aspect of what it means to be an athlete, but that is something I feel like. You know, given I'm tall, so I have a natural given thing that I could have easily maybe associated with certain sports. So I would have kind of just leaned on something that was naturally given to me, actually more naturally given to me than than music is. You know, oh, it's in your blood. You know, it's like, well, yeah, look at I'm 6'6", and I can.
It's in your genes.
Exactly. I can go play basketball because I'm built for it. You know, it's one thing you can't teach is height, right? So so I probably would have played sports, but as I've gotten older, I've definitely fallen more in line with visual arts, and I love photography. I really do love photography a lot, and part of the benefit of being a touring musician for as long as I have been has been in situations to be in some really beautiful places and or meet some really interesting people. And I feel like most touring musicians have some of the best photos you'll ever see.
Absolutely.
So I feel like photography could probably be something that I would do other than
music. That's very cool. Yeah.
But it would only work because I'm a touring musician, right? So I'd have to figure out a way to travel a lot too. So
right. Yeah, I mean, there's so obviously weddings and things like that are the easiest way to get into photography and things like that.
Yeah.
But to be like an artist photography, that's
totally.
That's a totally different field. But if you can do both, travel, you're already traveling the world. Totally. You're already there.
Totally.
Fucking take the pictures.
Yeah.
So besides your father, who are some bassists that inspired you early on?
So give me one moment. I think I just remembered I left some empanadas in the stove. Give me one second. I'm
gonna
run real quick. I'm gonna turn
No problem.
All
good.
Right.
It's good. The house is still standing. All right, good.
Thankfully. Well, let's see. Bass players that influenced me a lot. So I would have to say, let's see, that's such a hard one. I get that question a lot. Usually when I do I've done a lot of clinician work over the years. I've done a lot of teaching. I've done a lot of clinician work at everything from elementary schools to colleges. And
that's really cool.
and there's a handful of questions that you get sometimes, and one of them definitely is influences, obviously, and it's a great thing to answer because it is something that allows the other musicians and artists and kids who are looking and striving to expand their knowledge and their influences to try out some new stuff. So it's really important question for sure, and
Sure.
but it's one that it's hard to. I feel like the biggest influences personally actually are the musicians that I've played with,
Mhm.
not necessarily the musicians I've listened to. And so, I mean, as a child, as a kid coming up, it's easy because it was the music I was listening to for sure. And so at that time, it was like I referenced earlier. There was a lot of post-punk stuff that was happening that was now being established, and you had all this alternative music that was had some really great musicians in it. And so obviously I was influenced by people like the Chili Peppers and Flea
Mhm.
and Les Claypool and Primus and Nirvana and Soundgarden and like
Sure.
you know even Green Day. Like all of this stuff was influencing my more of my not aggression is like a negative connotation, but my emotion behind the instrument that I'm playing. Not even necessarily harmonically. For me, it was more about what was emotionally being represented in the music and the feeling you got from it. It wasn't you trying to it wasn't you trying to figure out. So I wonder what they're thinking right now, or what they're feeling, or what they're because you just the music slapped you across the fucking face, and you're like, oh,
Right.
this shit is awesome. I was like, this is how I want to feel when I play.
Yeah.
So that's what I really fell in love with. But then when it came to actually inspiring me to be like maybe a bassist who I am now, it's mostly the musicians I've played with, and not all of them are bass players, obviously, because there rarely are situations where you're in a band with two bassists. But I mean, probably the most influential is what might be Victor Wooten is probably the most influential from both a musical point of view, and then also from just him as a friend and as a leader and as a teacher, and someone who gave me opportunities and chances. I was playing around town locally when I was younger, and I was getting my feet wet and getting into playing music for a living I started when I was 15. I started playing in South Beach when I was 15, and it was something that I immediately just jumped on board with, and it was easy too because I was being homeschooled at the time, and I just kind of was like, you know what, I'll continue to study and work towards getting a GED, but I'm gonna kind of just lean more on this music for a minute and just have fun with it, and it just kept going, but I stuck locally. Really, I wasn't doing anything outside of Florida, and then I got a phone call from the sax player from this band called Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, who Victor Wooten was a part of, and I met Jeff in passing at some concerts I've gone to. I knew Victor already at that point for some time, and Vic I had met Jeff on some of the Bela Fleck and Flecktone concerts in briefly, but I was always there to hang out with Vic anyways. And Victor had he had told Jeff called him to see if he could fill in a couple spots because his normal bass player couldn't do his own music, his own tour, and Victor recommended me. And for me, that's about as big an influence as you can possibly have on someone is
Sure.
getting them a fucking gig.
Sure.
Like, I mean, seriously, like that
Yeah.
opportunity for me to play music and play new music and play music that is outside of my wheelhouse, which as a self-taught musician, for me is like the only way really to learn how to play music is literally to play it, not to go to school, not to read books, not to learn things off of albums. It's literally to go to a gig and play music and learn new music and not learn stuff that maybe you don't hear every single day. Everyone can sing happy birthday because you've heard it your entire life,
Right.
but you can't just walk onto a gig and play music you've never heard before. You have to learn it. You literally
Sure.
have to learn it. I also didn't read music at the time very well, very very limited. I still don't read music great, but um, I had to memorize everything I had to memorize, and some of this stuff was really really crazy wacky shit.
Right.
And it was for me, that's an influence that is incomprehensible nowadays at this point because it gave me all those opportunities, and then it continued to just flourish after that. It was something that just kind of was the next progression. The next obvious progression was I'm going to be local, and now I'm going to be start gigging out of Nashville and going there every, you know, handful of times a year, and then recording and meeting more musicians and artists, and then establishing myself as a touring musician, and then it just keeps going and going and going and going.
Yeah.
So that was,
you know, not only is that a great answer, but it's kind of eye-opening, because so when you think of a musician, like a bassist, guitarist, whoever, you always think like, all right, for the average person, you always think they must listen to like bass players. You know what I'm saying? Like they must study bass players.
Right.
But I think that's actually what sets people apart and makes them great, is that they don't study bass players or
so true. It's so true, because because if all you did was study Charlie Parker, then you would literally only sound like Charlie Parker.
Exactly.
And then what's the point at that point? You know,
Exactly.
it's like you've totally missed your opportunity to be the next whatever, the next you, actually. That you are the one that could have changed everything again, you know, ultimately. And I think that's the one thing that most people also miss the mark when it comes to my father. My father has been critiqued and copied and transcribed, and, you know, like, I mean, so many times, and so many people, they miss what it was my father had 2 children by the time he was 21, and he didn't have a lot of other opportunities. He was brilliant, obviously he was brilliant, but he did what made sense at the time, and he was creative in his own right, because he went after what he did for himself. It wasn't for anybody else. It was him just trying to make a living and go do this shit. And he didn't like consciously say, I'm going to reinvent the world, I'm going to reinvent the bass. He just said, I need to work. And that's really all it was. And then he stayed true to himself. That's it. He picked up the things that he loved. He played the music that he loved. He hung out with the musicians who taught him the things that he wanted to know about music and composition and harmony and all that stuff. And then he just kept doing it for himself. And that was it. He didn't copy anyone else. He wasn't trying to be, you know, the next whoever, Paul McCartney. You know, he was just
being himself.
That's right.
And that's really when the truth does come out. I mean, I think a lot of people hesitate nowadays. Well, it's so tough. The music industry is so weird right now. It's like there's so many avenues as to, you know, 25, 30 years ago, there was one avenue. It was, you had to be really talented or know somebody or get your foot in the door somewhere. Now you can sit in your garage and make music and put it all over the fucking internet. And sometimes things stick. It's just the way it works.
No, and it's also music is so much more visual now than it's ever been too. Obviously, you know, MTV changed everything with the music video, but now having these personal accounts of social media, and now you have kids that they associate the idea of like, man, look what this kid's wearing to music now. You know, what is this kid dressing like? What is he looking like? What kind of ink does he have? Like, it's such more a visual thing than ever before. Don't get me wrong, everyone had their own style, but that isn't necessarily the like, it was always music. It was always the music was the selling point. It was like, this shit was great. This is what's going to sell. You know, the record label would listen to it. We're like, we got to put money into these guys right now. And then they would maybe change some of the visuals. But now musicians and kids are going to school and they're already conscious about how they look, how they act, how they sound when they talk. Not even music. No, we're not even talking about the music.
Right. No, it's so true.
I challenge anybody. And to me, it also depends on if you're partaking in anything when you go see a live music, because that can definitely change your emotional ability to open up to things. But I challenge anybody, go to a show and take your time, and don't worry what anyone thinks. But every once in a while, just close your eyes and listen to what's going on. Like, don't get distracted by how hot someone looks or what visually is going on stage, or like, just close your eyes and see if you have any type of emotional reaction to it, because that to me is why you're there anyways. It's supposed to be that. You're not supposed to have lasers shooting off and all this other shit, and that's the reason you think you're having a great time. Don't get me wrong, performance is performance, and performance art is performance art, and there is a reason that I go see some of my favorite bands, and I'd rather go see them live than listen to the albums, because I do want to see what they're going to do and bring to the table. And sometimes the production's really, really great too. But I want to hear great music. Of course, that's completely subjective. But I want to hear music that is hidden, that is there.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone's different, and everyone vibes to different things. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, for me, I can go to most live shows, and even if I'm not really into the band, I can still appreciate it for what it is. Right?
Totally.
Will I, run out and buy the T-shirt or go to the next show? Probably not. But
right.
Still, I appreciate it for what it is. But yeah, there are some bands that I love to go see, and they're just like, yeah, I'll go see them every year, you know.
Right, right, right,
It all depends on who you vibe with. But now
right.
you're a part of various projects, really,
Hmm.
including Hipster Assassins,
Right.
Social Experiment. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
still around.
It's something that's just on the back burner. It's just something that I want to use, and I've always wanted to use. But it's more direction behind my own compositions,
Mhm.
and it's something that I at some point I'm going to spend a little more time doing for myself. But Hipster Assassins has been the closest thing to a project from my friends and I that we've been doing for over 10 years now, and it was just something that we all of us being musicians in New York at the time and having various other gigs or things going on to stay afloat, and be in this musical rat race that everyone's in, trying to make a living. We made sure that we had an opportunity to get together and just play together as friends and have fun. So that was really what Hipster Assassins was. It was us being in New York, and we were in town. Let's all get together. Let's all play. We never really rehearsed ever, and and I mean, like, maybe 5 times at the most in 10 years. And we would just get together and play music, and that's really all it was.
Right.
Um, you know.
So have you ever done any solo projects or want to do any solo, as far as, like, I mean, not just the bass, like I see you
Mm,
got the keyboards behind you,
yeah.
like a one-man band kind of thing. You ever do something like that?
I've thought about it. I do want to record something at some point, I guess, that is going to be a true representation of who I am, which is what writing is. Writing is like the no nonsense version of you. Well, it can be. The advent of technology now has made recording music way easier, and
Sure.
allowed you to kind of put a front on in terms of who you are as an artist and as a musician. I guarantee more than half of the musicians who are out there right now would have never been able to cut it when there was no um, digital recording, when you literally had to splice tape together and you had like 1 or 2 takes to get something right, and that was it. You're done.
Right. Yeah.
Get
And
the
you
hell
really had
out
to
of
know
here.
what you were doing.
You
Yeah.
really had to know what you were doing, right?
Yeah.
But I think the hardest thing for me is that I feel like I change constantly in terms of who I am, and
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe I should have true representations of each version for sure. But I feel like every 6 months or every year, I feel like I'm kind of in a new direction or a new path or something that is pulling me in music. And yeah, I need to stick to it and just do something at some point. And I want to, for sure. But I also I enjoy playing other people's music. I love
Yeah.
producing other people's music.
Yeah.
I love uh, uh, helping people write music and recording. And so that's taken more of the forefront, other than me recording my own stuff the last decade or so. So
Sure. Sure. Do you teach lessons?
I do. I teach a
Yeah.
lot. That the pandemic was something that forced a lot of musicians to look at other alternative ways to make money. And
Sure.
I've always taught in some form or another. Like I mentioned before, I've done a lot of clinician work over the years, but I took on a lot more students during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and I do love teaching a lot. And thankfully, I moved to a new place too, where there's a college nearby. I've taught at also, and there's a bunch of students I can finally start teaching in person again, which is great. Um,
Yes.
Teaching online with the latency and not being able to actually play music together has been it's like it was great to have that option to be able to make
Yes.
money during the pandemic, but it was also like the fucking worst thing too, because I wasn't playing music, period, and I'm
Right.
this close to being able to just like jam with somebody and work on some ideas and play, but I couldn't actually do it.
Right.
We're so close, but because of latency, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, a lot of teaching, and then staying proactive with other projects too. I've been playing let's see, my longest running tenured gig is probably with Jeff Coffin, who's a sax player with Dave Matthews Band now, the one I was
Oh,
mentioning
wow.
before that Victor hooked me up with. But I've been playing with him for now 20 plus years, and I've also been playing with Cindy Blackman Santana. She was the drummer from all the Lenny Kravitz.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been playing with her for, wow, 12 years now, 13 years almost. And Then I have a project with Mike Clark too, the drummer from Headhunters, and some musicians, New York musicians, and then a lot of other smaller little projects here and there that I'm constantly going in and out of,
Yeah.
and it's just never ending. Just I like wearing a lot of different hats. I like playing a lot of different genres of music, and having different roles in those situations.
Yeah.
Um,
I was
you know,
actually,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was actually going to ask about that. Like, if you were given the opportunity to be in one band consistently for however many years, would you rather do that, or would you prefer, like, obviously this, like, various projects?
I prefer various projects, um, just so I can, I guess, stay honest with myself in terms of me wanting to be an all around musician, like I'm not going to learn one thing and just do this and be and I don't mean necessarily master it, but and I don't know exactly, but like for example, like I was in this band called the Yellow Jackets for a
Mhm.
handful of years, and they were a institution. They still are, but they were, when I joined the band, they were such an important opportunity for me. But it was like that was all that I was available to do, was to be in
Right.
that band.
Right.
And as great and as blessed and how fortunate I was to be in that situation and tour and make some money and meet amazing guys and play some beautiful music. It was just that, and that wasn't something that I ever. Like, it was weird to be in the position and then post joining be like, man, I need to itch. I need to do something else. I need to play some punk music right now. Like I gotta let loose a little bit and do these other things. And that was, that is part of the reason, I ended up, we went our different ways, because I really do enjoy um, having these different emotions associated with music. And unfortunately, there isn't just one style or genre of music that encompasses all of it for me personally.
Yeah.
So I like playing everything and new stuff too, and trying new things down,
Right.
trying it out and trying to get it under my fingers. Um,
So
yeah.
yeah, like, genres aside, do you prefer the more like freestyle, like improv, or
Mhm.
the more structured kind of stuff?
Both. It depends on the music. It depends on the artist that I'm working with. For myself, I I have never written lyrics. I have never written anything that requires a frontman to be on stage. So for my own personal projects, it's always been instrumental, but it varies between instrumental in terms of hard and aggressive, to intricate and uh, complex and having some pretty stuff. It's like it's a mix between both constantly,
Right.
and trying to find the middle between the two. That's kind of the reason why I have the
There
punk.
you go. Nice.
A little bit of both.
Nice.
A little
Yeah, I
bit of
love
both.
that, man. I love that. I'm like that too. Like, I like to listen to everything
Yeah.
from like folk to
Yeah.
like some of the hardest punk out there to like heavy metal, you know.
Yeah.
I'm
For
all over
sure.
the place. If you look in my music, it's just like, what the fuck? This
Yeah.
is like
Right.
10 different people, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
You might
like it
want
like
to.
that. Yeah.
You might want to go see somebody.
Yeah, yeah. I go through phases, you know. It's like I
Mhm.
don't want to hear the same thing all the time.
Well, that's the thing too, is you don't want to feel the same way all the time. Music is an
And
emotional
I don't.
connection.
Right.
That's what it is. Music is supposed to be a vehicle that allows you to attach yourself to something emotionally. That's
Right.
all it's supposed to be. And I don't want to feel the same way all the time.
Right.
I want to be able to control myself emotionally through the music that I listen to, and I need to have a wide range constantly.
Yeah.
And I feel that way playing too. I can't just play one style of music. That's not who I am.
Sure.
I'm not a single faceted human being. I have
Right.
all these different things. So I
I
need to.
love that, man.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that, you know. And my wife asks me all the time, she's like, why do you listen to sad music, you know, all the time? Or not all the time, but like, why are
Right.
you
Right.
listening to this?
Right.
Like, because I'm happy.
Yeah.
I want to get in touch with my other, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
side.
That's
It's
right. That's right.
balance. It's
That's right.
balance.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, if I'm happy, I'm not gonna listen to happy music. That's too much
Yeah.
fucking happiness.
Yeah. No. Exactly. I agree.
Recently you were just on performed on the new Fences album, Bright
Yeah.
Soil.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
I'm really close with Chris. How
Cool.
long have you known Chris?
I've known Chris. Jesus, this is crazy, but I've known Chris for over 20 years. Also, he came.
Wow.
He came to the house that I grew up in, the home that my mother curated this whole thing, musically. She had an open door to a lot of musicians, and kind of randos too, people that we didn't know at all. And but she'd be in contact with people who were a fan of my father's, of uh, her late husband, and she would be willing to give them the opportunity, given the way that she felt about that interaction, to, hey, come to the house, come hang out, let's
Right.
grab some food. She would give them the opportunity to see a different aspect of somebody who most people looked at as some kind of like god in some ways,
Mhm.
some uh, unattainable person who. But the fact is that he was a fuck up in some ways. He fucking shit his, like everyone does the same shit. And
Right.
and a lot of times musicians and artists actually have a hard time dealing with this kind of um blatantly, like, whatever, like, it doesn't matter what you do, you can do anything. Some artists actually get away, and people get away with like pushing the envelope because they think they can't get away with anything because people just treat them this way. And it can be really detrimental
Right.
to your health. But it was a great opportunity for fans of my father to actually see a down to earth home, and a place that he would, lay his head and eat his food and
Sure.
relax and write his music, and enjoy the simple things that we all enjoy.
Yeah.
And Chris was one of those guys that was a kid that interacted with my mom online, and ended up coming to the house when he was like 16 years old or
Wow.
17 years old.
Wow.
And he was basically the complete diametrically opposite person that he is right now. He didn't have any tattoos because he was too young, but he looked a little more grungier. And I remember I think it was like summertime, and he's wearing like this like beanie hat because he was living in Boston at the time, and he's wearing like this beanie hat and like kind of long sleeve shirt. And I was like, man, this kid's sweating his ass off, and he's just sitting in our living room, really soft spoken, really
Wow.
sweet, really sincere, and just it's we all of us kind of connected really
Yeah.
well. And I ended up actually giving him a bass, and the body of a bass, and just encouraging him to play music. He was a bass player at the time, going to school for bass, and he just wanted to hang out, and it was really nice to meet him. And it was one of those things that was kind of like, well, I don't know if I'll ever see you again. Here's a bass, hang, yeah,
Right.
pleasure, So good luck. Stay in touch if you can, whatever. And we didn't really talk for years. And I I saw him, obviously, his career progressed though when he became a singer songwriter,
Yeah.
and he was apparently in contact with my mother, which I hadn't known. I had already kind of gone off and started doing my own stuff, living away. I lived in California for a while, living in Tampa, LA, San Francisco, Bay Area, Oakland, and then I was in and out of New York quite a bit too. Um, but apparently, my mother had been in touch with him the whole time during
Wow.
that thing, his progression, his ascension into music, into fences. And yeah, next thing you know, just kind of like I was in New York, and he was there, getting ready to put on. He had just done the Arrows single,
Yeah.
and we just kind of connected somehow. We were friends online, social media, and then we just kind of like started texting each other again. And it was really great to catch up, and it was really great to have us be so far removed from who we were at one point when we met each other,
Yeah.
to establishing things for ourselves, and establish ourselves as adults for somewhat too. And then kind of just like huge waiver, and then kind of just coming back together in a very uniform way, in terms of where we were artistically and musically, and accomplishing things and going after stuff. I mean, I was on television because of him, but I never made music videos or anything like. But I meant it just in terms of how we felt about our music progression and who we were as artists, and defining ourselves. And it was
Right.
really great to reconnect.
Yeah.
And he asked me to do some gigs, and we played a little bit. We recorded some more music, and yeah, I was in Mexico, and we, again, one of those kind of like in the middle of the night, yo, what's up, man? Hey, how you doing? Hey, it's great to hear. I hope everything's good. It's been way too
Yeah.
long. We got to hang. He's like, oh, by the way, I got this recording coming up. You should totally do it. Oh, cool, let's do it. And then next thing you know, 2 weeks later, I'm in LA recording. And
Right.
that's kind of, it seems like that's how it's always been between us.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. He's great, man.
Yeah.
I was kind of just a fan,
Yeah.
well, I'm not kind of, I was a fan. And,
Right.
I don't know. I don't even know how it happened. I really
Right.
don't. We just started talking online one day about some shit. He actually started this podcast pretty much.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Got me all these amazing people, and he
Yeah,
is
he got
just,
me on this one too. I mean,
yeah,
that's the reason we met. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's just one of the greatest people like in my life, honestly. Like we
Awesome.
just, and I've never met him in person. We just,
Oh, wow.
I only
Cool.
know him on online.
Oh, cool.
It's like this weird, like, does he exist kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even though I know he does.
No, of course.
But it's really strange, but beautiful at the same time. It's really cool.
Yeah, man.
One day we'll actually meet, but
Yeah, for sure.
so
You should.
yeah, you're on the new album, and first of all, I heard some, early cuts, early demos and stuff like that, and it sounds so fucking great. I can't wait till this album comes out.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited about it too. The process was great. It's always fun to work with Chris, and it's his brainchild. He
Yeah.
has everything stuck in here, and he's trying to get it out,
Yeah.
and he's trying to find the right avenue, and that right way to have that emotion on track. And it's really difficult in some situations to get that, especially when it's just a singular thing. But he gives a lot of musicians the opportunity to do some pretty cool stuff. And I recorded some piano and some keyboards and some just different things, and doing some little arranging and stuff. And just trying to find those moments and those things that get so close to what it is that he really does feel and hear in his head.
Right.
And the reaction of him getting to those moments and seeing him as the songwriter and as the artist get to that moment as his friend and as a bass player and as a musician, it's like, oh shit, there it is, great, we did it. I did it, we did it. Like, this is awesome, because now he gets refilled, he gets re-energized, reinvigorated with this whole process of what it means to be an artist who gives yourself to everybody. You're just being brutally honest with everybody, and you don't know how it's going to work out. You don't know if they're going to appreciate it or not. And it's not that you rely on that, but in some ways you do. You need that is the emotional context. That is something that you put a lot out on the line, and hopefully you get the the response.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. One thing I really appreciate about him is that everything he puts out seems to be intentional, and he's very careful about what he puts out, and I like that. He really cares about his art. And I call that album Fences Pet Sounds, because it's very different than anything else.
It is.
I mean, it's got elements of his older stuff in there, but I think it's a really progressive album, and I'm really excited for everyone to hear it.
I am too. I'm really excited to hear some of the new. I know there's going to be some mixing done on it, and have maybe bring a couple of people in to do some reimagining of some of the tracks. But what we have thus far was brilliant. I had a lot of fun, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get to hear it as he's doing it. Like, he'll send me things, because not only as a friend but as a fan, he wants the feedback.
No, that's great. That's great.
Great to hear it.
Yeah, that's great. He's got you in his corner too.
I gotta ask before. I know we're running pretty long on time here, but I have to ask about the Bass of Doom. We didn't get to that.
Yeah, cool.
This will actually be the second time I've spoken about this on the show, because I had Ryan Stasek on.
Oh, cool.
You know Ryan?
Of course, I've known Ryan for a very long time. Ryan's a sweetheart.
And we talked about it a little bit.
One of my favorite bass players. Yeah.
Oh, he's awesome. But I think we get a little closer to the actual story of it. So, where did it come from? What's the origin story behind it?
The Bass of Doom itself.
The Bass of Doom itself,
or it coming back into, because the bass is it's a 1962 Fender Jazz bass that used to be a stack knob that my dad turned into 3-knob, and he bought it at a pawn shop in Fort Lauderdale for like $70 or something, $50 or $70.
Right.
And it was fretted at the time when he purchased it, and he had another Fender Jazz bass at that time. He had a 1961 Fender Jazz bass that was a little more rare. It was just because of the production, the way the Fenders were back then. There was a lot of I'm not going to say inconsistencies, but instruments were different from each other. Even on the same rack, they would be different from each other.
Sure.
And because they were being handmade and all these different things. So the 61 fretted one that continued to stay fretted. That one was more of a two-tone, yellow to black sunburst, really beautiful instrument. And that's what he's playing like Teen Town on, doing all false harmonics like from Birdland on. But what he wanted to do was he wanted to try to get this fretless sound, this upright sound, but on an electric instrument. And so he took the least favorite of the two, well, not least favorite, but the one that was kind of not so rare. And he was like, all right, I'm going to take the frets out of this one, saving his favorite one, right? And lo and behold, that instrument ended up changing the world and being the one that was most people recognize him as the fretless bass player that he is.
Right.
So that is the origin of the bass of doom in terms of where it came from and how it became fretless.
Right.
But my father, you know, because of mental health issues, and because of the strains of being a musician who was being used and abused by a lot of other musicians at that time, unfortunately, and he was doing it to himself too. I'm not going to blame it. I'm not going to say that he didn't have anything to do with it.
Sure.
But he was neglecting a lot of things at one point, and moved to New York, and had the bass of doom with him there, and was in some various different living situations that were not ideal. But he ended up calling his luthier, Kevin Kaufman, who still lives in West Palm Beach, and he called Kevin and said, "Hey man, look, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's the weather. I don't know if it's like, you know, the humidity, but I'm just not getting a good sound out of my bass right now. It's sounding like shit. Can I send it to you? You can work on it and, you know, send it back." And Kevin was like, "Of course, yeah, just send it on down." And, you know, a week later, a box arrives about this big to Kevin Kaufman with my father's bass in it, because he had smashed it. It wasn't that he couldn't get a good sound out of it. He had literally smashed the instrument.
Wow.
So the bass of doom was pieced together like Humpty Dumpty,
Wow.
by Kevin Kaufman, and it had a flame maple top veneer on the top and back put on, and as far as I know, everything else was original, including the pickups and the electronics and everything. But the bass was kind of basically refurbished completely in terms of aesthetically the way it looked, so it didn't look like the bass of doom anymore.
Right.
And he had it back up in New York for a little while, and then it went missing some time before he passed away. You see some videos and some photos of him in the early to mid 80s playing with people like Borelli Legrand, this amazing gypsy jazz guitarist, and he's playing a lot of other different instruments, and you don't see the fretless again ever.
Right.
So it kind of just up and went somewhere. Nobody really knew the backstory.
Right.
And then about 15 years ago, I get a phone call. I'm living in Oakland at the time, right near Lake Merritt, and I get a phone call, and it's the owner of a guitar store, 30th Street Guitars in New York, and he had gotten my number from a friend of mine, Steve Bailey, and who's now the bass chair over at Berkeley. And he said that he had my father's instrument, and he was trying to get in contact with the family, and it was the fretless, and he wanted us to basically confirm it and write off and say, "Yep, this is it. You got it." And you know, I was in shock when I first heard it. I was like, "Holy shit!" It's like, it's paramount to, like, you know, a lost uncle or aunt or some family member that you've heard about and you see pictures of and you've heard stories about your entire life, and all of a sudden they're standing, or they're right here. You know, they've been found. It's just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And so I immediately started making some phone calls and reaching out to some people. I was like, "Oh man, we got to get to New York. We got to see this thing." Needless to say, without getting into any of the stuff that legally I actually can't really talk about, but any of the legal matters that were involved, the bass was eventually purchased by Robert Trujillo, bass player from Metallica, who my brother John had known for some time now, and I had never actually met, but My brother John is obviously huge avid music fan, and he's had relationships outside of my own relationship with musicians. So
Sure.
he knew Robert for some time and reached out to him. And Robert was gracious enough to help us out in terms of getting this instrument out of these guys' hands. For us personally, was something that was hard for us to justify allowing them to keep it, because there was no. It's called provenance, right?
Yep.
In the art world, right? It's the timeline of how something goes from point A to point B physically, right, and how it passed hands, and who, and there was no provenance involved, and it was hard for us to justify and say, yeah, here, just take our father's instrument. It's not that it's not worth anything, but the only reason it is worth something is because of our father. And it was something that our father always said he wanted to have in the Smithsonian, and it was like something I wanted to play the instrument, I wanted to hold it, I wanted to check it out, and it would seem like it was not going to be a viable option for us, and that they just wanted us to write off and say, yep, you got it, now do whatever you want with it, it's yours. Right. So we were fortunate enough to have Robert kind of swing in, and as a friend of the family, and as a friend of John's, and now a friend of the family's, obviously, he was like, I'll buy it, it'll be around whenever you need it, whenever you want it. Actually, when I was just recording with Chris in LA, I went to go do another session with an old family friend of mine. And I told Robert I was in town when I was recording with Chris, and then he came through, and he had the fellas with him. He just, right. It's something that it's not really. It's his instrument. Don't get me wrong. The amount of money he paid for that thing, it's fucking his instrument. But he shares it with us. I've had it at my house in a little tiny 1-bedroom apartment in Park Slope for like a year, just sitting on the wall. It's just kind of really crazy, But thankfully, because of him, and then going to go see Metallica at Yankee Stadium and seeing the bass on stage and stuff, because he played it on tour too. It's a really great place to go from it being lost to not knowing if it was still around, to like being damaged, to being lost and not knowing if it'll ever be back, to it now being back around and accessible to me and my family. And then to see it on stage and played by Metallica, which for me personally, and by Robert, to me personally, is kind of like one of the coolest fuck yous to all the jazz heads out there, because these guys are so pretentious in their way in terms of like what is good music and what is not. Right. And I can't stand that. I really can't stand that. There's nothing worse to me. If someone is turned on by 3 chords or somebody on stage dressing like a maniac, I don't give a fuck what it is. If that's what gets you from point A to point B and allows you to, manage your emotions in your life for that moment, then that's your music, and that's beautiful music, and that's music that is allowing you to get through the fucking day, And absolutely. So like, I love the fact that my dad's bass is on stage with Metallica playing, packed Yankee Stadium, and I'm just like, this is the shit. This is where it should be, It's an incredible
story of a journey of something like an inanimate object, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's so amazing, man. And I hope
that had such a huge influence on so many people, and the line it's taken and where it's ended up is really, really cool.
Right. Did you ever get to play it live?
I have played it live, and I've recorded with it multiple times.
Nice.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful instrument.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. And I'm glad to see it still around, and I hope it continues to stay around until it hopefully never falls apart. But well, hopefully at some point it does make it to the Smithsonian. I think that would be a very cool thing. That would be very cool. There was one more thing I wanted to do, if you got 2 more minutes.
No problem.
And then we're out of here.
Cool.
I found a video I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
On your Instagram that I need to ask a few questions about.
Okay.
So I'm sure you know what this is.
Yeah.
It's a corn cake with guacamole. Some things on top. I can't tell what it is.
They're crickets.
Oh, those are crickets. Shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even look at that.
Delicious.
You got a little something on your
I have legs sticking out of my
Yeah.
So for anyone listening to the podcast, because most people watch it, but
right,
if anyone's listening, Felix just ate a cricket sandwich, essentially.
Yes.
Some really toast with a ton of crickets on it, not like 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
It was like 25.
Which was really great because the restaurant that my friend Pablo took me and my partner to We showed up, and um, it was next to these pyramids, Teotihuacan, and it's a little bit like a touristy, commercial-ish, you know. And you look at the menu, and it's like, oh, cool, they got like some crickets. And my assumption would have been like, you know, for anybody who's traveling to these pyramids from out of Mexico, outside of Mexico, that they would have things that'd be a little bit more palatable for the non-Mexican,
like a pizza, you know?
Yeah, right. Or if
Yeah.
they were, if they were going to serve something with crickets on it, or grillos is what they called, that it would be like maybe a couple, you know, or like
Yes.
something where it's just like an accoutrement, it's just a little bit of a bit on top, and then they pull out this plate, and there was 3 of them, and it, like you saw, it was this corn cake, and it was, I mean, there might have been 100 crickets on there. The thing was crazy packed.
Yes. Now,
Yeah.
I can't tell in the video whether you're serious or not.
Yeah.
When you bit into it and you're like, What?
So like most things, I don't know. I think it's weird how most, and this goes along all things in life for me. It's all perception, and it's all
Mhm.
association, and it's all the way that we think we understand and we know what's going on, because that's how we find comfort, and that's how we think we're in control of our lives, which is
Sure.
probably one of the biggest fallacies of humankind, is that we're in control of anything. And we do that by saying that we know what this is, and we know how this works, and this is this, and this and this and this, and it gives us comfort. But some people might think that eating a hot dog made out of thousands of different pieces of body parts is also disgusting, right?
Right.
Okay. So in this culture, it's very common. And for me, it's something that you have to get past, first of all, is probably just the texture of it, because you don't normally eat things in the States that have a bunch of like little legs sticking out of it.
Mm.
But flavor wise, it was delicious, and I wasn't joking.
Really?
That was real.
Wow.
And also my mother was born in Indonesia, and I was raised around a very different ethnic foods and cuisines. And in Indonesian food or Malaysian food, it's very common to have these little tiny fried fish, full bones and everything in it, as your salt. You put that on to salt things up.
Right.
And to me, it wasn't very, very different. It's kind of, it's in the same line, same vein of that. So,
Wow.
yeah. It was
No, it shocked me because there was so many of them, and you
Yeah.
took most people. I
Yeah.
personally, I would be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
take a little
one.
bite,
Yeah.
maybe half of the cricket, right?
Yeah,
One cricket.
yeah.
You just went for it,
Yeah.
and
So
it seemed like you really kind of dug it.
I did, actually. I did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my first time eating crickets, actually. I've been to
Okay.
China. I've been to China before, and I've been to Thailand. I've been to Southeast Asia. So I've eaten some pretty wild, crazy stuff before. So I was kind of ready for it. But
Okay.
I was doing it also. I wanted to make sure I got a good bite too, because my girlfriend Bear was there, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that she sees, because she was going to do one too. She was going to take a bite too. So I want to make sure I'm not doing a little bit. You got to taste this.
Right. So what would you say then is probably the craziest thing you've ever eaten? Because that seems to be kind of midway for you.
I mean, I've eaten raw horse meat. I've eaten the 100-year-old or 1,000-year-old egg, which is basically just rotten egg.
Wow.
I've eaten skunk.
Wow.
I've eaten a lot of different random stuff. But I mean, visually, that probably is the weirdest looking one for most people. Because you see a cricket, you think bugs, you think lots of different things. For most people, that's probably the weirdest thing.
Right. I think what I can't get past is like, I've unfortunately, I don't really do it anymore. I try to take the bugs outside. I don't want to kill them anymore.
Right.
But I have stepped on a few crickets in my life, and they're just kind of like this like pus that comes out of them.
Yeah, you try not to think about that when you cook.
I guess so.
when you're eating them and when they're cooked, they usually dry out more. But it's true. Well, the thing also that's crazy is that there's actually it's a huge opportunity for humankind to have a alternate protein source. There are trillions of insects,
Sure.
And it's like you could feed so many more people. And again, this is just something that's unusual for our culture.
Right.
For everyone else that lives there, it's commonplace.
Right.
You go to the market, you buy those things by the handful. You get a little shovel and you just pile it into a bag. It's commonplace. It's the same thing like in music. In music, there's different cultures where we say it's unusual to hear something that's in like 7/4 or 9 or something in a meter. That's really difficult.
Right.
But that's only difficult because we're not used to it. You go to their culture, it's everywhere. It's commonplace.
Right.
Kids are singing in odd time or odd meter. So it's, you know, it's all association, it's all perception, it's all you feeling comfortable and not with it.
Sure.
And for me, I love traveling, and I love traveling, and I love experiencing the food and the music and the people. And that's the only way you can actually get the experience of traveling. Otherwise, you're literally just transplanting a part of America into a commercialized part of this country.
It's so true.
It's made for Americans, for them to enjoy American stuff so they can feel comfortable. You're not, dude, you should have just stayed home. You should have just taken a drive through Kansas.
Yep.
Why are you even going to that country if you ain't going to try this shit, you know?
Honestly, I couldn't agree more. And like, even when we went to Paris for our honeymoon.
Yeah.
And it was one of my favorite places on earth. And we stayed like off the beaten path. You know, we were in like this French only quarter, like as far as language goes, like nobody spoke English. And the first day or so we were there, we were like so uncomfortable. And this was before like smartphones and like translators. We had a book, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And but give it a day, and we like adapted to it, and we loved it, and we felt part of it. And they didn't look at us like,
right.
Everyone has this misconception that they hate us. It's
right.
If you act like an idiot, they're not
well,
gonna
that's
like
it. Every culture is the same in that way.
Right.
Every society is the same in that way. Just don't be an asshole. Period.
Simple.
Pretty
right?
simple. It really is
Right?
pretty simple.
on that note, man, that's a great place to end this. And thank you so much for doing this, man.
Of course.
You're just a vault of information. I actually learned a lot, and I
Cool.
hope everyone listening out there learned a lot too.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. One more question. On a scale from 1 to hell fucking yeah, how much did you enjoy being here today?
Hell fucking yeah, bro.
Hell fucking yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool.